Thanks, everyone. I'm happy to be here today with you, and I'm glad to follow Fabienne. I always like hearing her presentations. I missed most of it, but I'm here now. So I have a short presentation just to talk about a project that we undertook in the Gaspésie, talking about Indigenous partnerships and what that means. So just to give you a live example of a partnership, a project that was up and running. Well, was almost up and running, I should say. We never actually got to production, but we went from the beginning to from an idea, feasibility, and then we continued going on. I'll show you that through the presentation. I don't know what you see. I think that my presentation is on that side, and can you see my...
Troy, can you just give us 1 second? We're just pulling up your presentation
for sure, no problem.
On our screen.
So, yeah, while you do that, I'm just going to tell you a bit of background of the name SEN'Ti. So you're going to see SEN'Ti, my name of my company there. That was my great-grandfather, and he lived to be an old man. I remember him, probably like 95 years old. I was only like about 7 when he finally went to the spirit world. But when he was younger, he would hire young people in my community. So an 80-year-old now, he even tells me about the story when he used to work for my great-grandfather. And they would pick a bushel of potatoes. They would, pick berries, pick anything, gather things, and he would pay them at the end of the day. He would stand up, and out of his pocket, he would have a bunch of change, and he would pay everyone in cents, in pennies, copper pennies. So they started calling him SEN'Ti. So when you see my name there everywhere, it's honor of my great-grandfather. So can you see my PowerPoint yet? I don't know what I'm seeing.
Oh, sorry, Troy, not yet.
Okay, no problem. Yeah, that's my fault. I sent it at the very last minute. I was changing things. I was traveling around today, and I only got back to my desk at the last minute.
All good. So, we're glad you're with us.
Okay, you can see it now? Okay, good. So SEN'Ti Innovations, that's the company. Troy, I'm a Mi'kmaq from the community of Listuguj. And next slide.
Next slide. Okay.
Yeah, so I always begin thinking about a purpose. What's our purpose here? And for the past several years, my purpose has been around my son, Nesquin. Nesquin is 6 years old now. That's taken about a year ago or so. He's just as cute still. And Nesquin just means ceremonial drumming, the act of drumming in ceremony. But as I learned from one of my elders out west, when we're moving forward, they always say we move forward in a good way, have a purpose. So I always like to show off my son, and there he is. Next slide. So in terms of impact, I seen that, it's very clear for me is that as Indigenous people are on this territory since time immemorial, there has been a lot of development happening. And, because of a lot of the policies of the federal government, provincial governments, we've been left out, totally left out. And that has changed over time. And I think, the reason why it's changed is because we keep fighting. And we are a resilient people. And we do see, a path forward, and we listen to our elders talk about the Creator, and the Creator's put us here on this territory to manage the territory. We are part of it. We don't own it. We're more a part of it. We're more belong to it than owning it. And I think that's one of the things that happened in the early days is that, we didn't think in the same way. So we didn't own it, and people came and just started owning all our land around us. And with the renewables that are here coming very strong, and they have been for quite some time now. It seems like it's still coming, but this wave has been coming for a long time. And it just talks, that's an opportunity to begin to benefit in some way from what is going on all around us. And for us, I'm not going to talk too much about wind here on this presentation, but I did spend a decade of my life pursuing a project for the 3 communities from where I'm from, Gaspésie, Gaspé, and Listuguj. And we formed a tribal council, the Mi'kmaq-Mawiomi. And at that time, the Quebec government had a plan to put 50% of its wind energy projects on our territory, and totally left us out. Like there was not even it was just a very sad story. You couldn't even think that they tried to include us as anyway. Even during consultations, it was a wash. It was not meant to include us at all. It was meant to have something in the book, so if they ever ended up in court, they could say they tried to do something, but they did not do anything. So when that was happening, I was hanging out with a couple of the chiefs from my community, and I did forcefully tell them, you need to do something, guys. So at the end, we did do something, and we did end up with 150 megawatts of wind energy, a project from our 3 communities. We partnered with Intergex, and I should maybe, that was another whole partnership idea story that I could tell you. The main thing that we did, though, is that we knew we needed a partner, but we knew that the way the industry was at that time is that they would do everything and we would get some share of it. So I convinced the chiefs to say, Chiefs, let's leave the partners, at the door. Let's do the work by ourselves inside the room, inside the boardrooms. Let's force the government to look at us, with a serious eye. And once we have enough leverage, once we're just about past that tipping point, we'll go and talk to the partners and we'll say, partners, we've got everything that we need except the know-how on how to build a wind farm and manage it. But we've got the data, we've got the goodwill of the government. We didn't have an agreement yet, but we knew goddamn well they weren't going to build another project in our territory without us. And we invited a few of them in. Intergex was one of them, and we did end up having a very good agreement with Intergex. And I think it's been a fairy tale story since then. It's very good. We do have one issue still going on, though, is that the monies are all ending up in trust, and the communities haven't decided on how to properly divide that money. And I keep telling them the way to properly divide it is not think about dividing it. Think that we are all one nation and we should have projects that deal with the whole, with the people as one, instead of a number of different reserves like the federal government did in 1876. So that's another story, but that's where I come from in terms of my background about wind and talking about my great grandfather, my son. So that's who I am, and that's what I'll talk about. So let's go to the next slide. So in the red dot, that's where I am in the community of Listuguj. Our homeland is called Innuwegari, and all the territory is Mi'kmaq. So there are Mi'kmaq in all of this area. So in the Gaspésie, all in New Brunswick. Well, so I should say the eastern part of New Brunswick. The St. John River, the Wolastoq River is another nation, and then we're in PEI, Nova Scotia, and Newfoundland. Next slide. So SEN'Ti Innovations owns SEN'Ti Green Ammonia, and that's the project I'll talk about today mostly is SEN'Ti Green Ammonia project. So that's me, and then my partner is Mr. Beaver Paul. So he's a Wolastoq citizen from the community of Tobic. And then we have Proton Ventures in for a small part. They were actually the company with the technology that we were pursuing. So that's very clear. Next slide. Yeah, so I think that I'm just going to go through that really quick, is that Troy and Beaver, there was a big cement plant being proposed in our territory. Then the Mi'kmaq community had an agreement with them that they were going to have minimize their environmental footprint, and if they could reduce it and enter in agreements with Indigenous companies. So that was there. So because of the work that was done by the MMS, we were able to go to McGuinness and say, listen, you guys should do something about your ammonia that you're getting. So they use ammonia for DNOx, and they were getting it from, well, they still are, from St. Mary's in Ontario, 1,803 kilometers, traveling back and forth with 2 or 3 tractor trailers a week, carrying mostly water mixed in with some ammonia. So next slide. So we started looking at how we can have a green ammonia solution. So the power of ammonia, it's very simple and straightforward after you think about it quite a lot, but there is a lot of ammonia being produced in North America. In the States, they have pipelines with ammonia. It does act as a fertilizer. Most of our food is coming from that ammonia fertilizer. And the way that they traditionally make it is not very green, but the idea is that we would have a green way to make it with all of the renewable energy that's all around us. So we could use the wind power to create the hydrogen, and we would smash the hydrogen against the nitrogen, which we're all breathing. The air is full with nitrogen right now, and would create ammonia. And you could do a number of things. There's chemistry needs it, fertilizer, and then we would make electricity as well. Next slide. I'm not sure how many minutes I have. 4:36. So another thing that you could use ammonia for is powering all these boats that are in the oceans now. So it is very good at, propelling these larger vessels. You can use it as a fuel, and it's a catalyst, or it's a carrier of the energy of the hydrogen. So a lot of times you hear about hydrogen, but hydrogen is very hard to store. It's very hard to keep in a vessel. It wants to escape that vessel. It's the tiniest little thing there, and you would need a lot of space. But when we mix it with nitrogen and create ammonia, it becomes a power fuel, and it has a lot more energy for the size of the space. Next slide. I see a blackout corner on the top right. I'm not sure what that is. So we do make the ammonia from green hydrogen. So a lot of times you hear about the hydrogen economy. We want to make sure that what we're talking about is the green hydrogen. So we have gray hydrogen that is made from natural gas. You got blue hydrogen that comes from natural gas, and they store the CO2, which is, somewhat okay compared to what they're doing now. But what we're really talking about here in terms of the green ammonia that we're making is green hydrogen. So from wind power and hydropower, we would get the electricity from the grid in Quebec, which most of us know is 99% green. We would take water and we would produce the hydrogen. Okay, next slide. So what we see now in the world, it goes from the bottom left to the top right, and we're trying to think about the idea of moving from the top left to the bottom right. Okay, so right now there's a lot of waste that is getting in there, and what happens is that they make the ammonia, and a lot of it is used for fertilizer. In our case, we were going to use it for the denox, but the idea after that we proved it is that we would use it as a fuel. We're on the East Coast. There's a lot of fishing vessels that could use the ammonia, and even the forestry equipment and what have you. So we were trying to prove that this was being able to be done sustainably, safely, and that people could walk up to the plant that we were going to create and look at it and be like, okay, that's what it looks like. It's it's quite clear. It's very simple. It's very green, and the cost at the time. We were talking about, 2019, 2020, the cost was a little more expensive. But as we go forward, I think right now we beat it since the pandemic. Our green ammonia solution beats the way they're producing ammonia now. And if you incorporate the carbon tax that's on there, it's even better again. Next slide, please. So very simply is that we take the nitrogen from the air. So you can get a nitrogen scrubber like kind of off the shelf. It's not technology anymore. It's just, you would go almost to Amazon and buy it. You'd have to go to an industrial supplier, but you could just say, give me some nitrogen scrubbers. You could get that. And we would use electricity from the water, and then from there we would create ammonia. So ammonia is just NH3. And the idea is that it's a carbon-free fuel. Okay. Oh, sorry, next slide. Wish I had the button. So, here it is. It's an electrolyzer that we use to create the hydrogen. Very simply, you put H2O in. There is an oxygen that you have oxygen as a byproduct. For us, we were going to capture that oxygen, and we were going to provide it back to McInnes, and they would have been able to even have their, because they're burning petroleum coke to make a hot fire so that they could get the limestone to burn at a high temperature, and it creates all these different byproducts, and they use that to create the cement, the Portland cement powder. And we're not talking about, in this case, when we talk about McInnes Cement, I didn't give much background about them, but I will in a little bit. We're talking about a large facility, not the one that provides the cement to you to build your house, but the big company that supplies all of these smaller cement companies, okay? So H2O, there's a byproduct O2, and then there's the water reacts in an anode from the oxygen gas and positively charged hydrogen ions. And the hydrogen ions move across the membrane while electrons flow through an external circuit. Hydrogen ions and electrons meet up at the cathode and combine to form hydrogen gas, okay? So that's the basis of our green ammonia. Next slide. Okay, so here's the McInnes cement plant. It's a new cement plant. In terms of the outputs of the environment, it's one of the cleanest cement plants that is out there. But they do have two large problems. Any cement plant will be using limestone. In the future, you may see it that they don't, but limestone, inherently, when they use that, there's a lot of CO2 that is released just by taking the limestone and turning it into cement powder. And they also need a hot oven. So they use petroleum coke. So in this case, McInnes cement plant is the largest emitter of greenhouse gases on the eastern Canada. And if you look at any cement plant, they're all the same. They all produce tremendous amounts of CO2. They were in our territory. I forget when they were coming, but this plant was proposed in the 80s to 70s, and only when the price of cement got to a certain place, and then they have it on the East Coast because New York and Boston is the main target markets that they're sending it to. Eventually, the United States will catch up with itself, and they will have the largest infrastructure projects that are going to that never happened for a long time. All of their bridges, not all, a lot of their bridges and roads and other infrastructure will need to be replaced, and they're counting on that to happen in the United States. Maybe the pandemic pushed that down, a decade or so, but it's they are still selling a lot of cement to them. Next slide. Okay, yeah, so the McInnes single largest emitter. So they were assessing technological solutions in 2018. The first step in our case was to supply them with green ammonia. And that was kind of our early project to show a small project, a small footprint. It was about an $8 million capex. We did spend $1 million on a feasibility study to prove that it could be done properly. It could be done at scale, and it would be at the right price. And we did all that stuff. We had a lot of interventions from the federal and provincial government for the early stage. And then when we kind of got to the next stage, we kind of ran into problems in terms of financing it. We did have a number of projects that came out on the federal government, but there was always kind of intellectual property questions. There was, how much intellectual property you're creating and what have you. So we did have a hard time once we got to the next stage in terms of financing this project based on different programs that were available from the feds and the province. Ken, next. And I think the province was actually there more, but I think we needed the feds at that point to get there. So you can see what they're doing is that, they crush tons and tons of rock, limestone, and they bring that to the plant. So our second phase was to take the ammonia and capture it and use it as a fuel. And those large dump trucks and the large diggers instead of running on diesel, we would actually burn ammonia in them. And what SEN'Ti did to have McInnes as a partner, we did end up selling them fuel. So we sold 1 million liters of diesel to them for 4 or 5 years, 6 years. And the idea behind that was that if we get to contract, we wouldn't be offsetting someone else's contract. And we were very competitive in terms of getting the fuel contract, but it meant that we were almost making no profit. And it was something that we were doing just to have that business-to-business relationship. We knew that McInnes, was in their early days. They were trying to keep their costs low. They were looking for the lowest cost they could. So we went in and we got the lowest price and we got a contract. And from there, we went knocking on their door to say, hey, we're providing you the fuel. What do you think about us trying to turn your vehicles in over a decade period into ammonia vehicles? And they're like, well, what do you mean? So we started having discussions with them and we said, we know as well too is that you're purchasing ammonia from Courtright, but we know that you're going to try to have an ammonia mixing plant here on the territory. And we said, what about a green ammonia solution as opposed to, buying the ammonia, bringing it here, is still mixing it. It is better than what they're still doing right now. But it was still creating ammonia in the gray ammonia with the offset, with the carbon being released into the environment. So when we sat down with them, they said, okay, that makes sense. They first sent us to see the environmental committee. Then once we made a presentation to the environment committee, they were actually on board immediately, and they gave us their support. And then from there, we started doing feasibility studies. And only then that we found a partner from the Netherlands. They were actually having this green ammonia package, if you would, a small green ammonia package. And they had it in theory, but they didn't actually create one. So we were kind of going to be the first one on the ground in Canada, maybe the second or third in the world. And we were going to prove the technology here. We kept looking up north and we kept saying, this would be a very good project in the north as well. They don't have, they're burning diesel up there. So the idea was that we would create ammonia at a larger scale, 10 times, 20 times what we were doing at the cement plant. And then we would ship it up there once a year and turn their diesel generators into ammonia generators. So it was this was all of the development that we were having going on at that stage. So first stage, DeNOx. Second one is an alternative fuel. And then number 3 was to use it elsewhere. Okay, so I think that's what that was all about. Next slide. So the environmental benefits, I think I talked a lot about that. We're going to do the DeNOx, green fuel for heavy duty, green fuel for industrial furnace. In their case, they are burning. We were selling them 1 million liters of diesel a year for their quarry, but they were also burning 3 or 4 million liters a year in the industrial furnace to kiln. And the idea was that we would reduce the petroleum coke there. But that one, I don't think that they were too excited to do that. It takes a very complicated mixture of chemicals to create cement powder at the right, in the right quality. So number 3, I don't think that would have ever happened. We were thinking more after that about creating energy elsewhere, and the marine environment became a big one after we learned more. Okay, next slide, please. I'm going to stop moving around. I noticed I was dancing in my chair and I'm not speaking into the mic the whole time. So this was the technology that we were looking at. It was, the Haber-Bosch process. This was created in 1907, 1908, 1909, way back when. And it's been around since then. So it's nothing new, but the idea was to take it down to scale, to make it very small. Most of these ammonia plants got very large. So I'm always imagine when I drive by Lévis in Quebec, near Quebec City, the size of the refinery there for gas and oil. Ammonia plants tend to be like very large like that. So this, of course, is very small. So it's micro, if you would. You would have 4 or 5 containers. One, you would have the electrolyzer. So you have water and electricity going in there to create the hydrogen. Another one would be the nitrogen scrubber. Then you have the other one, the ammonia production unit. So that's where you have the hydrogen and the nitrogen coming in. So at the right temperature, at the right pressure, you create the ammonia. And then from there, we would store it. So it at the end, it became very simple, if you would, very clear. Just needed to get it on the ground. Next slide.
I'm just going to ask you to move to the last couple of slides pretty quick because I want to give it a couple of minutes for questions.
Yeah, I think I'm at the end. So I think I talked about all this. We could skip that one. Yeah, so just 2017 to 2019, we were pre-feasibility study. 2019 completed the feed study, and 2019, 2021, that's where we're going to be there to do the permits and what have you. Next slide. And then we finalized our discussion on January 23rd. I remember we were in Montreal Friday afternoon, and we're in a local diner. They had a TV, and we could actually see something happening on TV, and people start looking at it. So we didn't know, even with the first case confirmed, we still didn't know what was going on. But from February to April of that year, we were going to have a 10-year agreement. And then we were locked down. So we couldn't even go to the cement plant anymore. No one was able to go there anymore. Only the employees, 300 employees, and only them, they were isolated and they didn't want to close that plant. And then when we started coming out of the pandemic, Votorantim Cementos was sold to a Brazilian. And then when we had discussions with them, finally, they said that we're working only on integrating the plant into their large machine. So the effect of the pandemic was that we were kind of permanent paused. Next slide. And it's a small poem, and I don't know why, but I seen it in one of my power presentations. I wanted to bring it. Read to Joe. When I'm gone, the leaves of the tree will shiver, because aspen was a friend of one time. Black spruce, her arms will lay low, and across the sky eagles fly. The mountains be still. Their wares one time like painted pyramids, all gold, orange, red splash like we use on our face. The trees do their dances for show, like once she spoke, I love you all. Her moccasins trod so softly, touching. Slide.
All right, that was very great.
Okay,
I'm going to see if people have questions, but I want to say a couple of words of background on this. What this shows is how sophisticated Indigenous entrepreneurs can be with technology, how large-scale impact can go ahead, how the integration of different technology platforms have a major impact in decarbonization. What Troy has been noting is that given the changes of ownership, they're still in those discussions to go to the step 2, step 3. I believe it will happen, but it's the kind of thing that's really impactful in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, decarbonization, and large industrial plays, which I'd love to see some of the projects at the impact stage bring large industrial concerns into the equation. I want to see if there's any questions here from Troy before we have some final remarks from Kareem.
Hi, Troy. Thank you so much for your presentation. I'm very excited about this topic. And when people talk about this hydrogen revolution, okay, they are concerned about this potential of fire explosions with hydrogen. Okay, and I assume that if we have this ammonia, which in principle seems to be more like a power dense than hydrogen, and how would you compare, for example, the potential of having ammonia vehicle as opposed to a hydrogen vehicle? Thank you.
Yeah, when we look at ammonia vehicles, we don't think that it's something at the smaller scale, like a light truck or a non-commercial vehicle. It's something that needs to be larger, very large. I don't think that the space you would have to give up for your gas tank compared to an ammonia tank is quite large. So that's why we were thinking about something big like a fishing vessel, because there's space and you could store it there. But for a regular vehicle, it's not something that works effectively. It's just size thing. Not sure if I got the whole question, but I think that's what you had said. You asked. And in terms of safety, in the United States, they have pipelines, they have large storage tanks. In Canada as well, it's here. You probably don't even know it's all around us everywhere. A lot of these farmers have ammonia right in their, on their tractor in the back, and they're spreading it on the soil. There hasn't been safety issues. When they were using it as in a closed environment, in British Columbia, we did have maybe 8 years ago now, maybe longer, but they were using it as a refrigerant in a hockey arena. There was a leak. The first person went in, and they were not properly trained. When you smell ammonia, you smell it like, I'm sure you remember spraying Windex and you smell it. That if you were trained properly, you smell it, you would have left. The next person went in after him to try to save him, and he went in as well. And I think it was 2 of them that perished. So in a closed environment, it can be risky in terms of breathing it in. It will kill you. But with training, you wouldn't do that. It's like if you have gasoline leak, you don't light a match, kind of thing.
All right, thank you for that. It's been a long day here, and I'm sure it's late in your day as well. I want to thank you for this. What I would say is that the potential for ammonia as part of the solution on clean energy is critical as a storage device for large transport patterns and also industry. So thank you very much, Troy. We'll catch you up in a couple of weeks in Tofino.
Very good. Nice seeing you. Cheers, everybody.
Right.